Chairman, we're now live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to those attending and also to viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Resident Services Select Committee, and my name is Councillor Bridges. I am chairman of this meeting. The key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you'll be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. For those in the public gallery, you will not be on camera. A reminder to councillors, officers and those speaking today that you should turn your microphone button on when speaking. This will ensure you can be heard in the room and by those watching online. A few quick housekeeping rules before we go on to our agenda. We are not expecting a fire alarm this evening. However, if a fire alarm goes off, please follow the officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting point, which is the Civic Centre fourth court. Mobile phones to be placed on silent or switched off. And if we have residents here this evening, you are welcome to give feedback via the resident feedback forms at the back of the room. Before we go on to item 1, I would also like to invite any members who are wearing jackets who are sweltering the heat just as much as I am, that you may remove your jackets at any time throughout this meeting. We go on to apologies for absence, please.
No apologies, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting? I can see no indications. We go on to item 3, to receive the minutes of the previous meeting dated the 12th of April, pages 1 to 8. Are there any issues raising from the minutes, or can we agree those? Thank you very much. Item 4 is to receive the minutes of the meeting on the 11th of May, the AGM, a very quick one, as you can see. Can we agree that? Thank you very much. And I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in part 1. There are no part 2 items to be considered this evening. We go on to item 6, which is the impact of HS2 on parking and noise. A very warm welcome to our external witnesses here this evening. We'll begin with Ian, our planning specialist team manager, who introduced tonight's report, and follow on to introduce the witnesses as and when. Good evening, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. So my name's Ian Thyme, Planning Specialist Team Manager, and I'm assisted tonight by Rick Connors, HS2 Project Lead, and Jill Williamson, Project Manager. Chair, would you like me to introduce the HS2 witnesses as well? So Martin Walkhurst, SES Project Director, Lewis Stokes, SES Engagement Lead, James Richardson, SES Managing Director, Malcolm Codling, HS2 Project Client Director, and Kimberly Roy Harris, HS2 Engagement Lead. So tonight, Chairman, I just thought the first thing to do, I know I appreciate want to go into this as quickly as possible, busy agenda, but I thought it would be useful to, for context, to just show 2 bits of footage of the HS2 construction phases that just provide a bit of background to assist with questions tonight. So the first bit of footage is just it's about 3 minutes long. It's helicopter footage that's been taken by HS2, just flying across, starting here at Victoria Road. You can see RF Northolt to the top left of the screen, and we're flying basically on the Chiltern Line network as we head towards Ruislip. So the first pausing bit here, so the first bit of overground works from HS2 is the vent shaft site at South Ruislip. All this section is intended to be in tunnel, and this is the only bit of above ground works in this section as we fly through towards West Ruislip Portal, where the predominant works are occurring. As we approach the depot, you can see that broad alignment of the tunnel is right next to the Chiltern Line. As we hit the depot, we can start to see more activity at the top of the screen. Just coming up towards Ruislip Rugby Club, and you'll see on the ground here, a little circle. That's where there was a leak from the tunnel boring machine quite recently. And then as we approach this area at West Ruislip, I'm just going to pause it here quickly. So the second bit of footage goes into a bit more detail, but this is just an overview. So this is the tunnel entrance exit. So this is the first section in London that is above ground, save for the stations elsewhere. You'll see Ruislip Golf Course to the right of the screen. That's the driving range where my cursor is at the minute, now under a load of material. The tunnel portal entrance with two little holes where the tunnel boring machines have been launched from, Cecilia on the left and Caroline on the right. And then up towards the top you can see towards the Colne Valley where more of the work is taking place. So just flying through here relatively quickly, golf course on the right, the greenway on the left, it's coming up to Hillingdon Avenue, and then crossing the River Pin, crossing Breakspear Road south, and then into a large excavation here where there'll be a tunnel. The sustainable placement, southern sustainable placement area to the left of the screen, the northern sustainable placement to the right of the screen, and then just flying over Harville Road and then onto the Colne Valley Viaduct. So Harville Road is the split between two different contractors, SCS the Ruislip side, and then a line out towards Harefield and over in the Colne Valley Viaduct. So you can see the viaduct piers taking shape here alongside a haul road. Longest viaduct in the country. I'm sure someone from HS2 will correct me, but I believe that to be accurate. Denham on the left side of the screen there, and then Broadwater Lake coming up to the top of the screen, and you'll start to see the viaduct construction taking place. This is a little bit old now, so it has moved on, as you'd expect, but it's relatively recent. There's Dominique, the launching girder, which puts the segments in place for the viaduct, and there you can see the actual viaduct being constructed. And then out towards West Hyde, where the main element of the construction for the Colne Valley Viaduct is taking place, as well as the tunnel under the M25 and out towards the Chilterns. So it's just a whistle-stop tour, just from an overview perspective. I'm just going to go through the second one, which is a little bit more detailed now, starting at South Ruislip Vent Shaft. So you get a feel for the scale of the project. So this is the vent shaft at South Ruislip. The completion of this will see a new building sitting on top of this. So you've got the Asda to the left and the Odeon Cinema to the left of the screen, and then RAF Northolt just at the top of the screen. Moving out towards West Ruislip Portal now. So this is the area of the large amount of activity. Just pausing there, you can see the two tunnel entrance exit points. As I said, Sheila on the left, Caroline on the right. Attached to those you'll see large ventilation pipework to get air into the tunnels, and also conveyors that take material out of the back of the tunnels, and that's material that is disposed of on the southern sustainable placement area and elsewhere in the borough. So you get a feel for the significant extent of the works that have been taking place. You can see the greenways on the left hand side there, so sensitive receptor in close proximity. You can see the conveyor system at the end of the portal structure here. Temporary conveyor system heading off to the right, so that's the conveyor belt that's shown on the screen there. That's the temporary one that was put in place whilst the permanent one, which will run alongside the Chiltern line and out towards over Breakspear Road south. That's temporary one there just whilst that was being constructed, and that has resulted in material coming towards the where you can see my cursor on the screen at the minute. So material gets dumped there, and then it gets moved across Breakspear Road south. Wasn't planned for originally. It was intended that it would all go along the conveyor system, but that conveyor system is due to be commissioned towards the end of this week, beginning of next, which will allow for, which should reduce the amount of movements going between the two sites. And you can see all the other ancillary works. So the bridge over the River Pin and the bridge over Breakspear Road south there. You can see the conveyor running alongside the Chiltern line in between the HS2 line and the Chiltern line, and that will take the muck all the way from the tunnel portals across the River Pin, across Breakspear Road south, and then you can see the crossing point of the Chiltern line to what will be the soil treatment area and the sustainable placement area further to the left of the screen at the top. So this is 24/7 operation for the conveyor, so that muck has to, it's constantly coming out the back of the TBMs, so there is an element of, well, there's quite a lot of element of 24/7 working in this project, just to necessitate its finishment. As we go over Breaksby Road South, the line then ducks under what is a cut and cover tunnel. This wasn't originally in the scheme, so this was originally intended to be an open stretch of the route, but working with the project, they secured an improvement to the scheme, which will now be a green tunnel. So this will all be dug out, and you can start to see that at the top of the screen there. It'll all be dug out and then backfilled afterwards, so this will look relatively well landscaped with some ventilation chimneys in them. To the left of the screen at the top, you can see the soil treatment area, and this is where all the material from the tunnel boring machines will eventually go, get treated with lime to take the water out, and then will get placed either on the Southern Sustainable Placement area or backfilled on top of the Copthall Tunnel, which is this section here. And again, you can see from the extent of the activity around here, just the scale of the works of what has taken place already. And I'm sure we'll get into discussions about complaints later, Chair. At the top of the screen, you can see Harville Road, just running from left to right at the top, and you can see, you will see very shortly, the HS2 line going underneath the new alignment of Harville Road, and then ultimately up into the Colne Valley Viaduct on the other side. This is the new Harville Road bridge over the Chiltern line to the left, so that is one improvement for the project, is that the Harville Road will get straightened in this area, and the current old Chiltern line bridge, you can see just on the screen there, that will be demolished, along with the existing route, and a new alignment up towards the Dog Trust on the right of the screen. You see a lot of activity the other side of Harville Road, and that is to facilitate the Colne Valley Viaduct. A lot of extra equipment and facilities required around there. Head house for the Copthall Tunnel, electricity supply points, two of those, or feeder station and a supply point. So quite a lot of activity up there, as well as the construction of the viaduct itself, just by the HOAC site, which is just about where my cursor is at the minute, off Jews Lane. So that's broadly the route there. As you can see it in a bit more detail with this footage, you get a real sense of its enormity. Just pausing on this area, because I know this will be probably a topic of discussion for tonight. So this is the Southern Sustainable Placement. Got Harville Road to the right of the screen, Breaksby Road South to the left, in a sort of triangle. Soil treatment areas where the material from the tunnel boring machine will go, and then from there it will be placed, dumped on the fields to the south, in a variety of mounds about 5 metres high. That was approved as part of the Act, so although the Council was opposed to that, that was eventually approved by Parliament. So now it's just a question of how that's constructed to minimise the harm to the residents, and we're currently in discussions with HS2 Limited about that. So that's one of the soil placement areas, and then the footage will go across to the next one in a minute. So again, you can see the extent of activity that has happened already in this area. The new alignment of Harville Road just coming into your screen. Up towards the Northern Sustainable Placement area, I'm just going to pause that. So somewhere in this tree belt is New Year's Green Lane. You can see the Copthall Tunnel area towards the top of the screen. There's the Dogs Trust, so that gives you some sort of context with HOAC behind, and there's the lakes to Colne Valley over there. So conveyor system minimising interface with New Year's Green Lane, taking material right across that single track road and onto an area where more material is being dumped. And this is 2 mounds up to 18 metres high towards Bayhurst Woods near West London Composting, to give you some context. And again, you can see the sheer scale of the operations and how far it's already progressed. This is one of the sites that's gone very well as far as we're concerned. There's been limited amount of complaints in this area, limited amount of receptors. but has gone fairly well compared to other places on the project. Most of the movement of material is through the internal haul roads, as you can see on the screen. Again, reducing the amount of vehicles on the road network. And as we spin round, you'll see another one of the soil dumping sites, and this just takes us back to the helicopter footage just over the Colne Valley. So, Chair, that was just to give you some sort of context. I know that was a bit of a fly through, but I hope that was useful for the councillors to get a feel for what has happened over the last 4 or 5 years in the borough. So I will pass it back to yourself, sir, for questions.
Thank you very much. Anybody questions from members at this point, if there are any? No? Okay. Perhaps I can then... Councillor Farley, come on.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to understand the spoil removal. I'm not sure. We were asked for questions ahead of the meeting. They've been circulated. I'm not sure if you've seen them. You have. So in terms of the spoil, you mentioned the cut and cover already. Do we know what is not being able to be used or relocated? And if it isn't, where is it going? Which roads is it being taken out with? Which directions is it going?
I think, Chairman, at this point it might be useful to bring in the HS2 Limited team who are at the coalface, so to speak. Councillor, if I'm allowed to hand that across to whoever is best placed to answer that from HS2 Limited, and I can add from the council's perspective if necessary. Thank you.
Firstly, I'm James Richardson. I'm the Managing Director for the High Speed 2 works which run from Euston to here. We appreciate that, Euston to Harville Road. We appreciate this is a very sensitive area we're working through, and firstly we'd like to thank you for we clarify some of the questions that are already actually being posed. With regard to the actual tunnel spoil and actually what remains on site and what doesn't remain on site, during the early stages of this scheme, it's already been referenced that this was originally a very large cut area for the tracks to run through. The geotechnical conditions in the area were complex, and that meant there was a very shallow cut and a very large cut, which would have been quite a blight on the actual area itself with regard to actually the impact of that. So we actually looked at how we could consider an alternative option that enables us to put back material, and there's approximately 1.1 million cube of material that remains now on site instead of actually being taken away from site. With regard to material being taken away from site, that is minimised. I think we're looking at around about 100,000 cube total of actual material that will be leaving site, and it also avoids the train movements that originally anticipated, such that we can maintain that on site and not have those going away throughout the works themselves. I think the other part of that is it does have a improvement from a carbon point of view, but also biodiversity-wise, we can actually landscape the area and turn it back to a, let's say, pleasanter environment than just having that cut alongside the railway in this instance. Obviously, it's not applicable everywhere, but I think we've got that opportunity here, so we've taken that opportunity. Martin, do you want to say any more on the...
No, I think in terms of the material...
Use your microphone, please. Thank you.
Sorry, Jim. So Martin, I'm the project director, so I'm responsible for the section from Harville Road to Green Park, about 12 kilometres of the project. So as James alluded to, in the early stages of the project, we undertook a balancing exercise where we would reduce the amount of material off site. So instead of 1.1 million cubic metres of tunnel spoil being removed off site, it is placed over this cut and cover tunnel at Coptool. There is a surplus of material of about 100,000 cubic metres, of which about 40,000 cubic metres is left already. That material is taken to a licensed tip and disposed of under the legislation. So.
Councillor Farley, do you wish to add anything further based on what you've been given?
Thank you, Chair. Well, could you elaborate where it's going? You say it's a licensed tip.
Yeah, it's going to a combination of tips. So some of it has gone to a local tip at Beaconsfield, and at quite a limited amount. The majority has gone back to our wet facility, which is a materials handling facility at, I'll call it North Acton, but it's...
Yeah, so the facility we have in that location is actually a rail facility, particularly for distribution to set sites in several locations across the UK. There are 3 sites, and all those are actually sustainable placement to enable that eventually be turned into usable ground where their existing tips are.
Thank you. Councillor Smallwood.
Chair, as you'd expect, I have got multiple questions this evening for HS2, being a Ruislip councillor, but I just wanted to understand, because I do think it's slipped behind, how much is now going off by rail and how much is continuing to be taken off by lorries. I think my residents want to see more being taken off by the side rail, or mini HS2 as I call it, and how much is being taken off and continuing to have the multiple lorries that we have blighting our community.
James, you just want to go through the strategy, because I think that's the key to begin with. This.
Yeah. So the strategy around the maintaining this on site was to actually eliminate the rail transport as far as possible. So that doesn't mean we convert it to road. It just means we actually don't take that material off site, because originally the rail strategy was to take the material completely off site. So the aim is to actually keep it in the location on site itself. With regard to the current situation and lorry movements, I think what was already mentioned was there is a conveyor which will transport our material to these local site areas. We have had a slight period when we've had to work through how to get that in place and how to construct that. It's a very complex piece of engineering, with the breadth of the site, or the width of the site, is very narrow, and it runs right alongside the actual Network Rail assets. That's meant we've had a lot of work with regards to working with Network Rail to make sure it's safely implemented and put in place. That, as we said before, is going to be opened up next week, so we actually then start to migrate all the lorries or all the material from some of the lorries that are taking it around site to actually the conveyor. And then over a period of time we need to make sure we test that and we don't have impacts through noise of the conveyor, those elements that can be caused by that equipment. We eliminate those over the next couple of weeks while we commission that, and then that'll be fully commissioned. That should take those lorry movements out of the local roads completely. In the interim, we have anyway improved the intersite roads that we already have, so we don't bring many vehicles out of the site itself. We try and keep them to very local movements and actually try to minimise the impact at this stage. And that was, as I say, part of the strategy of that as to how we move the material in the short term. I don't know whether, Martin, you want to add anything to that?
So I think it's been a sort of fundamental change of strategy. So instead of rail removal, it's on-site retention, with the exception of 100,000 cubic metres, and the material around site is moved with internal haul roads. Yeah, there are a lot of lorries coming in and out with deliveries. The lorries are restricted by the statute agreement we've got at Swateley's roundabout, and we are working within those limits. So you will see, yeah, as James said, so that from next week we're going to commission the first, or the conveyor up to Copthall, and then there'll be a transition, and both will work for a while we commission and just understand how they operate. And so you'll see a transition in the next month from the conveyor into the golf course to a conveyor straight up to the STA, the soil treatment area at Copthall South.
I was just going to add, we already have the New Year's Green Lane operational conveyor in place. That's to avoid those as well. So that's been in place and running for probably about 18 months now. Again, to try and avoid any of those movements that we might have in that area.
Councillor Small, do you follow up, please?
Chair, unless colleagues want to have any more questions on that, I wondered if I could just move my questioning on.
I can see no indication, so by all means feel free to. I know, Councillor Farley, you have some questions as well, so I'll ping-pong between the both of you until I see anyone else chip in. So if you want to have your follow-up, and then we'll go to Councillor Farley.
And if Councillor Farley's okay, I will come in on question 4, because I just have some positive thoughts on that, and it'll probably be the only positive part you get from me tonight. But lorry movements, I'm going to call them illegal lorry movements that are going through non-prescribed HS2 routes, continue to blight my residents, the residents in Mickenham and South Harefield, the residents in Harefield, and actually I believe residents as we go down, as usually in West Drayton and Uxbridge, as they come off the A40. My understanding is that actually, having watched it a little bit and done, it is not necessarily it's not actually necessarily SCS's when you're first in the supply chain, as in your guys that you do everything. It's a lot of the third parties that you are hiring to carry out the work because you're not going to be able to do that. Now, my feeling is that, and I think if you take Ladygate Lane in my ward, 45% of fixed penalty notices were paid. Now, my concern is that actually some of these third-party contractors are just building in these fixed penalty notices, when they pay them just to pay them because that's part of it, but also they know that it's one of those things that, we'd far rather the police were going around catching proper criminals and prosecuting things like that, and actually when there's so many of them, it becomes difficult to prosecute. I'm not using that as an excuse, but that is my concern. My concern is they are building it into the margin, so I'd like to understand what action HS2 is taking and SCS is taking to penalise those that are continuously doing that, and we know that it's one or two permanent offenders, so that they know that they will lose those contracts with HS2 should they continue to do it. Or do you think that it is actually your guys that are doing it? That's not necessarily what I think. I think it's your third-party ones, and what strong action you are taking to stop them from doing that.
Yeah, that's Malcolm Colling. I'm the HS2 Project Client Director for SCS. We, under the HS2 Act, have an assurance and understanding and undertaking with yourselves, where we are limited at Swakeley's roundabout to 550 movements, which is 275 deliveries. We, on a weekly basis, sit down with the line and we ensure that we have never breached that 550 limit, and we haven't since we started. And we're not going to intend to do so. If we did, it would have to be fully investigated. Mark Thurston would have to write a letter of apology to the Secretary of State, the Department of Transport, and it would become very, very painful. So we're very mindful of the numbers of lorries at Swakeley's. You also mentioned about lorries going off route. We worked very hard in bringing innovation to HS2. I'll cite SCS is the most innovative delivery partner that we have on the whole of HS2 at the moment. They brought forward an idea to use ANPR cameras to check whether lorries are actually sticking to the routes or diverting from the routes to take shortcuts of the approved Schedule 17 routes. These cameras will operate 24/7. They're in the process of being installed and will be operational by early to midsummer. Okay? We had a lot of planning with the traffic department at Hillingdon. We've been absolutely marvellous in helping us get those underway. You're ahead of the game because you'll have them operational before Camden, which we've also got agreement to put in. Okay, so there's a good spot there. But the other good thing about it is it's the first time ever in construction in the United Kingdom that ANPR cameras have ever been used, believe it or not. So we don't have to stick people on street corners and count lorries to make sure they're doing the right route. We've got automated systems now that can track them, log them, and even go down to, do they have an HS2 logo in the front of their cab window displayed? So we actually do track all these metrics, and people who are repeat offenders, they get a driver's pack. They're fully trained. Okay, they go through a training course. If they're repeat offenders, they will be removed from the project, and we have done that on a number of occasions. If the supply chain who got these repeat offenders keeps doing it, we cancel their contract. That's as simple as that. They will have no further business with HS2 anywhere on HS2, because a lot of them go into cross-boundary works and so on and so forth, so they work for the delivery partner. But it just is not acceptable. So I totally agree with you. We do take it very seriously. Thank you.
Chairman, just to add, if I may, to the Councillor's question, we're also looking to introduce a new sort of driver training package for existing and new drivers who work on the site, and they have to essentially pass a test, not at the same level as cab drivers, but it's a similar principle where they understand what the routes are, they understand where they're allowed to go, etc., etc. And if they don't pass that test, then they're not allowed to work on the site. So that's something new that we're looking to introduce. We understand about, obviously, councillors are lobbied by people in your area and residents about traffic, and I think the measures that I've just mentioned there, along with what Malcolm's there, we understand the severity of this, and we understand how, I think what is important is that we have traffic numbers to adhere to. We have not exceeded any of those numbers, but we feel that we will always go the extra mile, introduce these new innovative measures to try and help you as councillors when you're dealing with people in your area, essentially.
Councillor Small, your last one was a follow-up. If I can go to Councillor Farley now, and I'll come back to you afterwards. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I note the ANPR cameras, which are to the north of the A40. I have seen a lorry in West Drayton High Street, so where you've got your supplier, which is in Useley, why a truck is travelling southwards through West Drayton High Street in the middle of a weekday. It's not going to the supplier. What's it doing? It's got the sticker in the front window. Seen it. The supply chain. I would like more information about this, because you're saying that the spoil, the change in the plan was to keep the spoil on site. What was my understanding was that you were trying to get as much to the site and away from the site by more sustainable means, not using roads, etc., etc. We've got lorries. These ANPR cameras don't help south of the borough. They're where your supposed approved routes are. So, how are you tracking lorries when they're off the beaten track? They're driving around willy-nilly, spending time driving around the borough, because they clearly can't be captured by these, and they're not visiting, or appear to not be visiting suppliers, as it's indicated on here. Furthermore, the suppliers that have been selected, do these suppliers not exist sort of more close to the site or outside of the borough?
Chair, again, all the lorries that deliver or leave deliver material or leave the site have the HS2 sign up there, and if residents, members, officers sort of see instances where these vehicles aren't adhering to the approved traffic route, we would employ please let us know, and then we can speak to the contractors and suppliers. We have had instances where we're found, one of the downsides of using local businesses and contractors is sometimes they say, oh well, I know a quicker route, I'll just nip here, or I'm going to nip there, but again, just to reassure you, we do take this incredibly seriously, which is why we're looking to introduce you the measures. But if you or members of your community councillor or officers are aware of these deliveries of vehicles not adhering to the route, please let us know. If you let us know, then we can do something about it. Just in response to your point about you using local businesses and contractors, Martin and I have done some work just to look to see what is the value to the local economy of this project. And for our area alone, for Area West, which is the area that Martin's responsible for, we've spent over £107 million with businesses local. So any business with an office or a site office or a depot within the London Borough of Hillingdon, so it may well be businesses located within your ward or any wards across Hillingdon, but we've specifically focused on Hillingdon, London Borough of Hillingdon postcodes. Over £107 million has been spent to those businesses who can provide us with products and services. So there's a real value to the local economy in doing that. In addition to that, it's not just about the financial benefit. Sustainability is something that is really, really important, especially in the construction industry. If we're using local companies to provide us with products and services and material, it means that there's a lower carbon footprint from using those companies as well. So we understand the issue and the concerns that you've raised, Chair, and the other councillors around the table. And like I say, that £107 million is not an insignificant sum, and throughout the rest of the construction of this project, specifically Area West that we're referring to tonight, there will be further money spent on there. And again, what we can do is an exercise at the end of the project, and something I would very much welcome, us coming back and speaking to you on that, is to see what is the overall economic value of this project to businesses within the London Borough of Hillingdon area. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I invite a follow-up, Councillor Farley, Ian, you'd like to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to that, I think there is the approved lorry routes that are set out in the Act and have been through Schedule 17 planning approval by the Council. There is a bit of flexibility within the Act itself and the Code of Construction Practice that allows for routes off that to be used, and that is to allow access to local businesses. So that's so obviously the approved lorry routes in Hillingdon is Harbour Road, Breakspear Road South, up towards Victoria Road, the A40, and then out onto the M25. That would, if they just stuck to those, that would basically negate any activity with businesses in West Drayton, for example, in the south of the borough. So there is an allowance within the Act for local businesses to be able to get to those approved work sites. So obviously if they do a deal with someone in West Drayton, they've got to get from West Drayton to an approved route, and obviously that shows up on the system as looking like it's not an approved route because they've obviously got to get from West Drayton somehow. So there is that allowance. In terms of the actual lorry movements, I think we also got to be careful about what kind of movements are coming to and from the site. So we talk about material coming out of the TBM, and the project's tried to reduce the amount of road traffic movements. There is a lot of other extra lorry movements associated with bringing material in, so that's raw aggregates and various things like that. So there is quite a lot of other material other than what's been produced by HS2. And just to complete the picture in relation to further local businesses, I know there's some business on Skip Lane, which is almost directly opposite the work site at the Copthall Tunnel that we saw on the screen. There's a lot of activity between those local businesses and HS2, basically right on the doorstep. So those vehicle movements go on Harville Road, but only on for a very small period. So I think that hopefully that answers your question, gives you some comfort as to how we're tracking that, along with the ANPR cameras, which the council officers will scrutinise and hold HS2 to account to make sure that they are sticking to the road as per Councillor Smallwood's concerns.
Mr. Richardson.
On the ANPR cameras, we appreciate that there is a limited area we can do with ANPR cameras, but what I would say is this is the first time this has been used, and this is the first borough that been used in for this purpose, and it will give us the ability to have the evidence alongside the measures we take at the moment to take action and make sure those individuals that are breaching this are, we manage that and we make sure that doesn't continue. So I appreciate there's a limit to that, but it is absolutely a step forward with regard to the control of this kind of, let's say, off-route management and movement.
And just to go up that, the location of the cameras
your microphone.
strategically placed.
Oh, sorry, you've got it.
The cameras are strategically placed en route, and to take up your point you said earlier, they're also strategically placed off route to catch them going off route.
Councillor Farley, do you wish to follow up to your original question?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, don't begrudge businesses. Obviously, that goes without saying. We want to have local businesses engaged. It's when the vehicles are, based on where the supplier is, that vehicle should not have been where it should have been, where it was, and it didn't appear to be carrying anything in the back of the truck. It was heading south. So West Drayton usually are heavily congested. I mean, West Drayton High Street itself is a very, very congested road. And the ward itself, there's only limited ways you can get in and out. So that was really my issue with that was making sure that the vehicles should be where they should be and not going all over the place. I'd like to move on from that to the report that we've been given on page 18. And this is something that I'm not. I mean, I'm not a planning expert. I know this is subject to acts of Parliament, etc., etc. I appreciate that. But what gives me some concern with this, and the officer can help. We've got examples here of where work that HS2 requests takes 15 weeks or 16 weeks. Excellent work done by the council officers can reduce that down. It does sort of worry me that where the council may not be involved, there are activities going on that are being extended for. I mean, if it can be reduced to this, why did you originally think you're going to need 15 weeks when you could be done in 4? I'm just concerned that there's things that maybe the council's not involved in that are taking longer to be done and drawing out the project. I mean, the project, you've admitted it's contentious. There's lots of people that are not happy with the way certain things have been done. But, from our point of view, I'm sure from residents' point of view, you'd like you to complete as quickly as you possibly can and move on further up the country and leave us behind, so to speak. But I'm just worried that this, to me, really doesn't make it doesn't sit well with me.
Chair. Apologies, Councillor, we haven't had sight of that particular report, so I'm not, obviously page 18, it's not something that we've got any knowledge of background of, but I'm fairly new to the business, joined the business last month, in the middle of last month as consent and engagement lead for Area West, so it's part of my role and the role of my team to essentially to work with your officers at Hillingdon. I think the response or what I've found thus far is that the relationship is really good in terms of, you know, the response that we've had from officers. I think same with anything that can be improved upon, and I think that's one of the things I'm looking to introduce is to assess how the interaction between our organisations and just in terms of the other point that the officer made about business on Skip Lane, 85% of the concrete that we've used on site has come from Skip Lane, so less than 100 metres or so from the perimeter of the site. The other thing, what I would say, Councillor, is, you know, a project of this size and scale and complexity is quite unique, which is one of the reasons why I came to work on the project. But what again, being new to the project, I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you this evening, for you to invite us here. What I would suggest is I would like to invite you to come and have a look at the site for yourself, so you can see the measures that we've got in place to deal with it in terms of booking drivers on, so we know who's coming to site, at what particular time, where they come from, who the actual driver is, that they understand the site procedures, they understand the routes that they have to go to. In addition to that, the measures of mitigation that the site team have put in place, Martin's team, for dealing with things like dust and noise and sort of clearing up the whole roads, and just to see, and as James mentioned earlier, the site is fairly constrained in terms of the width of it, but I would like to sort of put an open invitation, if you like, to you as councillors, or indeed any officers who you think would find that useful, to come to site, actually see firsthand the measures that we have in place. And again, just potentially give us some feedback. So, Chair, if again, we'd like to open that invitation to you, to any other councillors that you have, certainly obviously the local councillor there, please, if you'd like, I'll make sure I send my details to your Democratic Services Officer, and if they want to get in touch with me directly, we can make those arrangements for you, so you can come and see firsthand the measures that we have in place, Councillor.
Thank you very much. We will certainly take that consideration, and we'll get you to liaise with the clerk outside of the meeting. Thank you for that. Ian, do you want to chip in? Sorry.
Could I just... we haven't seen the report, but yeah, we obviously would look at that. What works really well is when we actually work together, because sometimes those weeks that we try and find and take out of programs is because we worked out a way whereby maybe for a short period of time we've got a different kind of access to a utility or whatever that might be. And I think that's really the aim that we're trying to have with all the parties that we work alongside. So it could well be that actually what we've done is come together and found that solution. And rest assured that our aim is to find ways, working with utility providers and the design organisations we work with to actually deliver this, to find a way we can reduce the actual time we're out, particularly on your highways, because we know the impact it has. So it could be one of those that we've actually gone through that assessment and that development process to try and minimise those impacts. But as I say, if you have that information, we're very happy to have a look at it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So I think going back to that, it's in relation to the utilities works, if I remember rightly. So the original plans that were put forward to the council, they had very long windows of closure, which, politely put, the council was not overly happy with, which led to some fraught discussions. And in fairness, the project responded well. That's how we got those dates down. So in all the utilities works and all the operations on the road, they have to come through a permitting and approval route, and we work collaboratively with HS2 as to when we can allow roads to be closed, but obviously we've still got a project to get over the line, hence the reason Harville Road's closed again. So I don't think any of the officers in the council will be overly content with what's gone on those roads, Breakspear Road South and Harville Road, and I know the people at HS2 know our opinion on that. They've been closed more times than we would have liked. There has been a lack of sort of joined up thinking within the project to enable works to all happen at once or to minimise closures. That's certainly the impression we've got. That was the early on. We have made improvements in that, and you can see that from the report there, particularly Wayne Greenshill's team and the Highways Department, who is very forthright in protecting the roads and the residents. So we are making strides. There are areas where the project still needs to respond better. For example, the conveyor belt has taken some time to get up and running, which has resulted in the council having to allow a bit more flexibility to HS2 to do other operations which have an impact on our residents. But ultimately I think it does show that the officers are there trying pushing hard HS2, and they are responding, but it, ultimately is a massive beast to get over the line, and there will be complexities. So it's responding to those, and the project is doing that now better than it was doing previously.
Thank you very much. We actually have two new members wishing to ask questions, so I will fast track them. Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you everyone for your words this evening. Just following on from a point that Councillor Smallwood raised about, and I appreciate the answer you said in response to those who didn't follow the correct track, that you said you'd remove them. Just in the interest of sort of working together and working with the councils, could I put in a request that you let us know when people or companies are removed from your project? Please, thank you.
Again, obviously the new measures that we're looking to introduce, I'm hoping that really gets rid of the instances where that is, but again, that's something that we'll look at and make sure that we'll engage with the officers on that to see exactly what happens. And again, what we'd rather do is incentivise the drivers and the companies who provide us there, not to do that rather than, it's the carrot rather than the stick. But yeah, that's something we can certainly look at.
Supplementary?
Yeah, just I suppose a question to the officers, once they let you know, if you could let either the committee know or at the very minimum the ward councillors that that it relates to, please.
Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for coming in today. As a resident near where the HS2 site is taking place in Harefield, one of the things that I'm really concerned, and in our resident groups that we have, the lack of communication is really a massive thing here. So I'm glad that new people have come on board, because obviously there is this engagement needed, but I just feel that residents really are shouting about the fact they don't know what's going on, which makes the frustration of closures and everything else that happens really more, makes them angry, makes them furious, and with the length that this is now going on for, it is in their constant lives, from people taking their kids to school, people having hospital visits or doctor's visits or anything like that. And I really do feel that there needs to be more community engagement on this project, because it just seems like it's a step away from the community rather than with the community. It is contentious, it is, but we need to people need to know what's going on, and that is a criticism. It's one of our questions that we put forward, but it is a real criticism of how the project seems to have gone forward, and all this is happening, and we've got people lorries are going this way, and everything's, and not using the routes, and now you're putting an AMPR, because obviously you've realised that is happening, which is why AMPR is coming in. So it's great that we've got these solutions now, but residents have had this for 5 years for this solution to come in. So we need to have more engagement. We really do need, and people do need to know who those groups are that you're talking to, where they can go to get that information from, how you're delivering that information to, whether it's council officers who then relate to the ward councillors, and to actually full council or something as well, so that we can all share it with our residents. Thank you.
Chair, it's a really valid point, Councillor. In fact, Kim and I were chatting this afternoon about the importance of community engagement. Obviously, we have a really good and experienced team in Area West. There are lots of initiatives that we're doing. So along the TBM route, the tunnel boring machine, which Ian kindly showed on the video earlier, we've got teams going out there regularly and speaking to residents about making sure that they understand what's going on, what we're doing, what the impact may be, what if they like to experience something, who can they come to and talk to with that. As the tunnel boring machine moves along, what we'll do is obviously not focus so much on the residents where it's passed, but making sure that we keep in touch with those there. In fact, one of the comments that we had last week is that residents said that they're going to miss members of our team calling and knocking on the door as the TBM progresses. We're absolutely in full agreement with you there that more engagement is critical to a project like this, so residents feel importantly that they have a voice, but also they know exactly who they can come to if they have got any questions, comments or concerns or anything like that. This is the HS2 help desk. In addition to my team and our team going out and door knocking, speaking to residents, putting letters out, we have the information hub, which is on site, which is open 2 days a week, and that to allow residents. Kim, I know you're itching to get in, I'm going to stop talking shortly. We have the information up there, which essentially is a drop-in, so for residents to come to, they know that that's there. We make sure that is staffed during those times, and that there's up-to-date information, which is equally as important as doing the engagement, is having up-to-date information there. So that's available for residents. Again, what we're looking to do new in innovative ways. Obviously everybody's looking to do things on social media, and Kim and I spoke today about what can we do to improve the offering on the website, things like that. So there are lots of challenges and lots of opportunities to further engage, but we're in full agreement with you on that. If we don't get and give the message out, then there's a vacuum of that. Then that's really not good either for us as an organisation or indeed for the local residents themselves. Kim, I know you're itching to jump in.
Yes, just to add what Lewis was saying, we do have a lot of engagement forums, so like the drop-in centre, we have regular events, but we really, do want to work with you if we can increase that reach of engagement, if there are any new ideas of what we can do. We are looking, to improve kind of the social media advertising we've got about road closures. We have advanced notification letters. But yeah, we do admit that we could, sometimes be better at engagement, and we'd really like to work with you to kind of improve that. So.
Ian, would you just like to chip in before I go to Councillor Punjab?
Thanks, Chair. I think Lewis is speaking mainly from the SCS front. From the Harefield side of things, a lot of the impacts are line-based, so associated with the Colne Valley. It is a bugbear of ours that we have asked for more engagement events. A lot of the engagement events that they do associated with the Colne Valley are Rickmansworth Way or Denham Way, so it's sort of outside the borough. So we have asked for more engagement up in Harefield, and we were talking about it this morning at the directors' meeting with Councillor Lavery, Cabinet Member for HS2. So hopefully we'll see an improvement in that. There is also a standing concern from the council about not informing our own comms, because our comms team are more connected to the residents than, say, HS2 are. So that's something that we've challenged HS2 to improve, and I'll hopefully see a better response from them on that. So there isn't a drop-in centre for Harefield, I don't believe. Maybe that's something that we could perhaps certainly set up. I'm getting some nods there, so I could put that down as an action for HS2, particularly as we go over the summer with the works on Harville Road and also in the area. So hopefully that will help, Councillor.
Sorry, just to add to that. So we do have kind of drop-in sessions in Harefield, but we can definitely look to maybe have a more permanent drop-in session or do more pop-up events to increase the frequency. And it would be really good to talk to you about, what the best locations for the local residents are.
Councillor Punjab, would you like a follow-up?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. That's really good to hear, and I'm really glad that actually has kind of come in about this and putting more things in the sites there, because when it is outside of borough, and as you are doing door knocking, you're doing it within the vicinity, but actually I may not live 2 doors there, but it impacts on me as I go through that area on a daily basis. And so it will do, because it's a route path to the hospital, it's a route path to Uxbridge Town Centre, it's a route path for many residents in going there. So I think that it is important that, and Ian's right, that it actually, the council have more reach, because we have our residents as a borough, not just as you in your vicinity. And I think that partnership and looking at how you stay more engaged, because it is important that we are talking not just to people in the vicinity, but the people who use that pathway and use those roads and use the areas as well for whether it's work, leisure, or just a route through.
Again, really valid points, and in full agreement with you. And I think one of the things I'm looking to introduce is to see whether we can do perhaps some more collaborative or partnership working with the third sector as well. Those that manage community venues in the local area, where you have the mums and toddlers, you have the youth clubs, you have all of these other groups operating from there. Can we get information out there? One of the key objectives for us is to produce regular newsletters that can go to a defined distribution area, which again has all of the up-to-date valid information about an update on the work, update on things like traffic and other measures mitigation things that we've got in place. I know we've been a little bit behind with getting that approved, but I think we're just about there with the recent one, and then we'll distribute that using a third-party distribution company, not Royal Mail, because then you can't always guarantee that it lands where it's supposed to. But again, so we can get that the wider message out to exactly what you mentioned there, Councillor. Those who don't live directly along the route of the TBM, or those who don't live directly adjacent to the site, but the wider geographical area, so we can ensure that those residents are kept just as informed as those who live on our doorstep.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm just going to follow up on Councillor Punjab's point, which I agree. The first thing I'd say is SES's community engagement I find very different to HS2's. SCS, tickish. HS2's, big cross. We don't see them necessarily as engaged as SCS are in the HS2 Hillingdon Traffic Liaison Group and the community group. I actually think those two groups are really beneficial. Just to reassure members opposite, we do get invited as councillors. Those that are HS2 keynotes, as I might call them, the ones that want to speak to you every day of the week, and quite rightly, certainly do get involved, and the residents' associations do get their voices heard. And I find those meetings are quite helpful to us as councillors. We don't necessarily get all the log points finished off as we do, but we are certainly being heard, and I cannot criticise SCS from that perspective. I also don't think it's hard to inform the council about comms when road closures are happening. This is really easy stuff, and it shouldn't be left to me as a councillor to write in the Ruislip Community Group when Breaksbury Road South is being closed. Right? I then get crap for it because they think it's me. So then I double think, because I'm a politician after all. So right, I'm always thinking about what's going to make me look in a good light. We all do, right? That's our jobs. So actually, that is down to you. And actually, you know, people do jump in and defend you and go, oh, it's not his fault, but you know, those things aren't hard. And I think the very engaged are served very well, actually. I do think the very engaged residents who have a lot of this, and as Councillor Bridges said, the ones who have on the site, it's actually just those people that might just get affected by, they're coming home from work and Breaksbury Road South is closed, or Harville Road is closed again and it's another 20 minutes till they get home, right? Those little things that are impacting people's day-to-day lives. And the other thing I would like to see, either from HS2 or SCS, is some easier to get to community funds for community projects. We've got the CEF and the BLEF, which are obviously the big business thing and the community one, but actually they're really hard forms to fill out, right? They're not easy. But for example, we've just secured a nice 22-foot Christmas tree in Ruislip High Street this year, where we've got to raise £4,000 to get it up, right? That should be the exact sort of thing where HS2 or SCS can be seen to be doing something amazing with the community for a very small sum of money, given the rather large sum of money the project is costing. So I guess it's around how are you going to better serve the wider people? How are you going to work just a little bit better with the council comms when if you're going to close the road, just tell them. And is there something we can do around some sort of honey for some of our local groups and local people? Thank you, Chair.
Chair. 2 or 3 points raised there. What I would say, I firmly believe in engagement is not just us with residents, it's about political engagement as well, to make sure that you as the local councillors have as much information and a route into us if you've got any questions or comments or anything like that. So again, through your Democratic Services Officer, I'll make sure that you've got my contact details, and we should make sure that there's a regular dialogue, and then you can keep in touch with me and my team about what we've got going on. I've come from a background I spent 10 years working in the volunteering community sector, so I understand the importance of community funding for community groups and organisation. Again, I've got no curtains in terms of, I'll let Kim talk about the HS2 funding, because it's not something that SCS have a real involvement with, but if the one thing that I'm taking that is, I hear what you're saying, I understand that, and I'll be looking to see what opportunities we have. If anything, we're already looking to do some things with the rugby club in terms of helping them with, it may not be for all community groups a financial backing it. You know, we have a huge amount of really talented, well-educated and experienced staff who can help with community projects, things of that nature. So there are a range of options which, like I say, I'm just finished week 4 last week, so I'm fairly new to the role, but absolutely in full agreement, Councillor, that there are things that we can do and things that we'll explore as SCS, but I'll let Kim talk about the HS2.
Yeah, it's just about the HS2 CEF and BLEF funds. Fully agree with you, quite a complicated application process, although we're really happy that we've had a lot of applications from Hillingdon recently and a lot awarded, and we do have, we can help and SCS can help, so if anybody needs help filling in the application form, then we can help do that as well. So that's also some support we can provide.
Thank you.
We've got a social value policy, and actually some work we've been doing for the last 4 years around actually how we can support groups around this. I suggest we probably need a separate discussion on those that are interested to go through that, how that can support particular groups. Because in essence we've tried to shape that around the main issues in the local areas and the groups in those local areas. And it's anything from STEM, homeless, obviously work with SMEs. That whole piece we've actually done a huge amount of work with, so I think it's probably worthwhile setting up a separate session for those that are interested to actually go through that and see how we can support you more.
Thank you, Chair. And we do have some good news stories. I mean, in particular, Helena Webster, one of our officers and her team, who do fantastic work in helping our group set up the Seth and Blessing, and they deserve praise for that, Chair. We had some SCS, some of your workers came down and helped us steward Remembrance Sunday. So there is some good things, but there is an awful lot more that we can do, I think, especially around communications and letting people know that. After all, you guys are in comms. You want, like us, you want to give yourself to be in the best light. I wonder if I could just ask a quick question on parking. A lot of the roads around Ruislip and I know the Ickenham area are impacted by parking, and I know that you have a scheme where you want people to travel into work without on public transport, but that isn't always viable for everybody, and some people don't listen to it. But it does mean they are parking in our roads inconsiderately and dangerously, and I know sometimes like a steward or somebody to try and stop them doing it is employed. But we still have a problem with it. It has helped a little bit with the opening up of the extra car park on the West Ruislip site, but there is still that, and I just wondered what more work you can do to try and encourage them to come to work by public transport or alleviate the local parking issues. And then I promise that'll be my last question.
Yeah, we are obviously aware of the concerns around local parking, and as a result we got, with Ian's help, got the additional car parking down at West Ruislip. That car parking is not full on a daily basis, so there is space. There is a challenge with the parking over at Copse Hall, which is at Harville Road. There's been an instance at Moor Hall Road recently, which we've policed vigilantly and continue to police. I believe that issue is now solved. Again, I think if there are incidents where illegal parking pops up, please get onto the help desk, and we will instigate the right procedures, because we have minibuses that travel from the main stations, from West Ruislip, from Ickenham Station, that transport the people around the site. So we've made it as easy as possible to get public transport out to the area via the station. So there's a minibus that goes around in the mornings and then drops people in the evening. So But if you get instances of hotspot parking and illegal parking, please get onto the team and we'll deal with it straight away.
Just one thing to add to that, Councillor, is a member of my team actually went out at 6 o'clock in the morning for when people start arriving to ensure that nobody was, just didn't tell anybody he was going to do it, didn't even tell me as his line ones he was going to do it. He sort of went out there because he understands that we would introduce various measures. The team have instructed our subcontractors to ensure, we have adequate parking on site. As Martin says there are other measures in place, so the team went out and did that. So we think it absolutely has improved upon. But again, it's something that we want to remain vigilant with and ensure, because we know it's an issue that you, councillors, get contacted about. So if we can continue being on top of that, like you say, we've introduced new measures, we'll continue to keep on top of that and monitoring that, because that's really important for us.
Councillor Gardner.
The only thing, I represent Hayes, so I don't hear too much about HS2, apart from people who are going on hospital transport to the hospital. Is it possible that you could let the hospital know when you're closing roads, when there's obstructions and things like that? Because it's incredibly important for the hospital transport to be able to get people to their appointments on time. Otherwise, they have to wait. I mean, somebody from my ward actually was sent home because they got there so late.
Absolutely agree with that, Councillor. And Ian, isn't the emergency services a part of the transport working group, so they're notified of road closures and things like that? And so I'm pretty sure with the things like the fire service and the police, but we can have a recap of that. Again, part of being the role I'm trying to review all the committees and forums that we have to engage and communicate with residents and other groups. But I'm pretty sure the emergency services are kept informed about that. Ian, you can probably shed a bit more light on that rather than me.
I'll give you the full up once the answers come through.
That's correct, Lewis. The emergency services are engaged in the traffic liaison group meeting. Whether that includes Hillingdon Hospital or not, I'm looking to Rick Connors to my right to assist.
Hi.
There's a separate meeting for the emergency services, chaired by HS2. Glenn Tobin from Align does it every 6 weeks. So all of the local hospitals, their contacts should be on that meeting. It's called Business Resilience or something akin to that. Chair, I will take an action, Councillor Gardner, to confirm whether a representative from Hillingdon Hospital is on that, because obviously there is, to and fro between Hillingdon Hospital and Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon's on there. Is mainly impacted by the road closures, but I will take an action away to just confirm that Hillingdon Hospital is on that.
Councillor Gardner?
I'm talking about Harefield Hospital actually, because they've got specialist teams there, and sometimes people have to get in there quite quickly. I mean, it'd be nice if you could let Harefield, for example, know, so that they could tell the hospital transport when they go out where they're going to be hold-ups.
I'm pretty sure Harefield Hospital is on the list. Kim looks like she's right.
So yeah, Harefield Hospital is on the list of the meeting, and then they receive the information. But we'd be more than happy to send kind of all the contact details of people who are part of that group, and if we feel certain services within the hospital need to be added, then we would be very happy to do that. So thank you.
Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. Two last questions from me. One is back to the ANPR cameras. The data that's been collected, obviously these are not just outside the sites, as far as I understand, and they're dotted in certain key strategic locations. Who is the data owner when the information is recorded? Because obviously not recording your vehicle, it's recording general public's information. How long is that information being kept for? And sort of the data security aspect of what's going on, where it's going to.
I'm afraid I'll have to revert back. We'll have to revert back on that, unless Ian can help. But I'll have to revert back where that data is held and for how long, and we can get back to you on that.
Chair, as I understand it, it's only capturing the data of the HS2 lorries. So it's not storing data of all the traffic that's going through. It's logged in, pre-logged in, so it knows which number plates to capture and which ones to not. So it's not storing data on public information. What happens to that data after that is still a point of discussion between the council and HS2, because obviously we want as much access to it as well as the logbooks to actually make this a meaningful exercise. So we know which vehicle was supposed to enter a site and what happened to that vehicle afterwards. So that we're hopefully that there will be an open and transparent process, certainly between the council and HS2, to allow us to do that scrutiny process. But to confirm, as I understand it, there is no public data that is held on any other road users who are not HS2 related.
James, sorry, did you indicate?
Yeah, I was just going to confirm that we do not hold data on vehicles that are not there for High Speed 2's business, and we obviously have agreement with those contractors and those individuals for holding that data. We do have to have a conversation about how and work that final protocol through between ourselves and yourselves. That's because actually, as the data owner, we need to be very, very careful about where that data finally is held, and obviously when it's destroyed. So, as I say, that is a place where both of us, both organisations, need to be very cautious about how that's managed.
I'd just like to add it will be under the GDPR Act. So it will never be kept for that, a length of period longer than what the Act says.
Councillor Farley, do you have a final one?
Yeah, thank you. I was just making sure that I understood where we were with that, so thank you for that. And finally, just for my information, because again, I don't represent an area that is directly impacted by HS2, but for the purposes of the borough and for residents to know, if they don't know already, when, pretty bluntly, when do you expect to be out of Hillingdon? And to give our residents some peace. So I'd just like to understand how much longer residents have got to, deal with issues that they experience.
It comes in a number of parts, where the civil works element, and then following us will be the rail systems element. They will have a temporary siding at Copthall. which will be used to build the railway into the tunnels all the way down to Euston, and probably go further north over the Colnbury Viaduct. That will go on until 2030, because that's when the railway will open. It will ramp down significantly, having a lot of experience in this area, probably around about 27, 28. But they've got to get the rail will be coming in, the long welded rail will be coming in by rail, nothing on the road, okay? They'll be launching the track that way, going through the tunnels. So there's a lot of more briefings to come on what rail systems are doing, because they're still formulating what they're doing with their contracts at the moment.
Chair, I've got something perhaps a little bit sooner than Malcolm's point in terms of roadworks, which I suppose has been a key topic of discussion for this evening and probably a key point for local councillors. We expect to see a real shift in the quantity and the volume of works within the highways, and certainly by the end of this year, even early November of this year, we expect to see the vast majority of works in the public highways concluded, which will see obviously less traffic management in the area. We'll see less disruption, less diversions, things like that. So appreciate Malcolm's comment about obviously the wider context of the HS2 in terms of the rail and the rail systems, etc. But in terms of the topic that we've probably spoken about most this evening, transport and traffic, expect to see a real shift in that by the sort of early mid-November of this year in terms of works to the highways.
Thank you very much. I appreciate we've been on this topic now for just over an hour. Of course, it is a very important issue to residents, which is why we're discussing it for so long. But I would just like to close by thanking all of our witnesses this evening for their attendance. I would invite some final closing comments if you wish to do so, perhaps Ian or indeed HS2 or SCS before you leave. If you wish to comment on it and close up, you're free to do so. If not, we'll move on.
No, I think the only closing comment I would have is we are going to be here for a little longer, and we appreciate that that has its challenges, but also I think we need to work harder, and I think the conversation we had around how we can support some of the actual parts of how your residents are impacted, both information-wise, but also how we can maybe reach into some of the social value we can bring as well, I think is important for us. We're not here to not be additive to the actual area. It's a balance between those, and I think the closer we can work together, the better. And it's back to the conversation we had around maybe some of the impacts, short-term impacts, actually managed really well, can potentially reduce the impact overall in the actual local area. So I think it's how we work in those instances that's really important to us.
And again, just to add, obviously you mentioned if members and officers would like to come and visit the site, please feel free to get in touch and we can accommodate that as and when required. Or if there's members of your community, community groups that perhaps have an interest in that or would like to come and see, or indeed hear about obviously the jobs and the other economic values, would be more than happy to accommodate those. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ian, any closing comments from you?
Not too much, Chair. I think it's fair to say it's not been plain sailing to date. I think things have improved remarkably, but there's still a lot of work to be done this year, particularly as we move into what seems to be a hot summer. We're talking about the Southern Sustainable Placement outside people's doors in effect. So there's a lot of work that we've got to do with HS2 Limited, and we're looking for them to respond positively to that. We had a meeting this morning in which our requirements for them to reduce their working hours to minimise disruption seems to have been taken favourably by the project. Just to give an illustration of how the officers are pushing HS2 Limited to do things that they probably weren't overly keen to do. But it's a challenge for the HS2 project to respond to the way that we're trying to protect the residents. And so far, there has been an improvement on it, but there is more work to be done.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for your attendance. You're free to leave whenever you wish to do so. We'll take a very brief pause while we move the posts and the notices around for our next presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, we're back. We are now on to our next item, which is item 7, the Public Spaces Protection Order 2023 review, pages 23 to 50. And as per the new rules of this committee, we will not be taking an officer presentation. However, we will go straight to questions, and then we'll invite the officers at the end to give any closing remarks or any comments that they wish to make. So I will now open this up for questions. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Gohill?
Thank you, Chairman. Just what I've noticed with PSPOs is that they're allowed for a certain period of time, but from what I've seen, if they're allowed for a certain period of time, they almost as that period ends, there's another one that kind of starts up straight after it in areas of high antisocial behaviour, let's say. Is there a particular time limit, or is there like an extension or something that's granted? I just would like to gain a bit of clarity on that.
So the statutory provision only allows us to implement a PSPO for a maximum of 3 years. So that's why we're in a cycle of this 3-year implement, review and renew. So yeah.
Follow up, yeah.
And the current PSPOs, do you find yourselves repeating it on the same streets, or is it how can we as a committee, or we as councillors rather, feed into that PSPO system to maybe introduce new streets, new roads? I ask this because I just two evenings ago I was at my local Safe Neighbourhood team meeting, and one of the roads, which happens to be a border with another ward, was getting missed out by police, and there was some dodgy business going on there, let's say, and maybe that would benefit from a PSPO because it comes under some of these categories.
Thank you, Councillor. The PSPO is a borough-wide PSPO, so it covers everywhere, all public spaces to which the public have access to, so it covers everywhere.
Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, Chair. When a PSPO notices is issued, how are residents or how are people informed? Is a notice put up on a lamppost, or? Please, thank you.
So we would normally highlight this. So the public consultation is firstly how we seek the views of residents. So what we've done is produced a proposed PSPO for the next 3-year period, and we've invited comments. So that's gone up on all our websites, social media, etc. And once we've arrived at a final version, we will promote that final version as setting the new 3-year period via social media in the usual way that we would with comms. We've also written to each individual residents association to invite their comments as well. So it should have reached quite a few sort of borough groups and also town centre groups, chambers of commerce, business improvement districts, etc. So we have invited quite a few comments, and we will then be updating them further once the final version is agreed.
Follow up?
Thank you. We have a fairly active association where in Hillingdon East. Could they be sort of informed if we gave you an email address? Because they do sort of send out emails and social media stuff to the residents. So maybe that will be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. If they weren't on our original list, we're more than happy to add them on. So yeah, you can send that to Joe and myself.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Smallwood?
Thank you. I wonder if I could just focus on the public space restriction orders for town centres and whether there's any scope to widen it. Now, I get this is usually probably based on volume and size, but and I apologise for using a ward example, but Ruislip Lido, right? I mean, if you've been up at Ruislip Lido on a hot day, there is a lot of people there. There's a large amount of antisocial behaviour going on. The residents there are blighted by it, whether it be noise, bad behaviour. Is there any scope to look at, it doesn't always have to be volume over a period of time, but look at places where there are hot spots that aren't just town centres?
The short answer is yes, and actually we've received quite a lot of feedback through the consultation regarding Ruislip Lido. So that will be one of the things that we'll be reviewing, and if appropriate we can add those similar town centre restrictions to the Lido and perhaps other green spaces where we've been notified of similar issues.
Your follow-up, Councillor Ward?
Got no idea how that happened. I wonder what I just wondered, is there a threshold though? Is there like a set of ticks that you have to get to issue one?
In terms of issuing the FPN itself or the PSPO?
As in the PSPO, because I got the feeling, having spoken to colleagues there's outside of the borough and others that have got them, there's sometimes quite a high threshold because obviously they come with issuing them comes with their own set of issues.
So you have to be able to justify the introduction of a PSPO. So we would look at things like complaint history. We would look at previous sort of attempts, perhaps failed enforcement or other types of enforcement that would not be appropriate for those sorts of areas that could be sort of plugged by the use of a PSPO. So as long as we can demonstrate that it's justifiable and proportionate to the harm being felt by that local community, then yes, we can implement it.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about the town centres. So on page 34, these are the additional ones that are for this PSPO to come forward. I'd like to understand how much of an issue, where these have come from, because they seem a little excessive, in my opinion. So I'd like to understand what's driven the council officers to suggest these as additional items. Thank you.
So, as I explained previously, we would have to ensure that there was justification, and that justification can come through complaint history, particularly in relation to the town centre ones. We do have a high level of complaints centred in and around these issues for the town centres. We also have feedback from police partners who are present in the town centres, who perhaps don't have powers themselves to deal with certain aspects of this sort of behaviour and would prefer to see something enforceable through the introduction of a PSPO. So as long as it is justified, we would look at that complaint history, and we would look at officer experience, we would look at feedback from those town centre groups and our partners in other enforcement agencies.
Councillor Farley?
Thank you. I mean, just based on my experience in town centres, I mean, megaphones and whatnot, few and far between. I mean, in my experience, I mean, some of the smaller town centres who don't tend to have things, there's not space for people putting up. I mean, you've got more of an issue with people overstepping their trading licences on the fronts of their shops than you have of people setting up randomised tables and whatnot. So I'm still just trying to understand how the extent to which these complaints, how many you're getting, that's warranted this. Because as I say, in my experience going to town centres, these things, you've got begging is a particular issue, and you've got that already. But these things, to me, who's complaining about, charities or whatever that are popping up in there, and I'm getting thinking that this. I just don't understand where this is coming from. Or what the extent is. The extent of where this is coming from. I'd just like to understand some numbers, if possible. Yeah, so I can definitely get back to you with some more detailed data on the complaints. I don't have that available at the current time. The idea with this is not to restrict the regular activity that is taking place. We already authorise quite a high number of charitable, community, religious and political groups to have stands, have tables in our town centres, and we do that through a legitimised authorisation procedure, which many of those groups will follow, and they have regular spots. This is really intended to catch the ones who don't seek the authorisation. So it gives us the power
to impose a penalty or to move people on if they don't come to us and seek an authorisation. So, as I said, we have a highway event permit process, we have highway events and street trading, and we have all of these other permissive regimes, but what we don't have is an enforcement tool or enforcement capability for those that just bypass that or don't go through the proper authorisation process. So this is really, it's not to ban it outright at all, that's not what we're seeking to do with this, but it's to ensure that people are channelled through the route that legitimises and permits. And one of the reasons that we do that is so that we can ensure that not 10 people descend on any town centre in any given day, which we do have, and Uxbridge is a perfect example, where we have multiple groups that will just come and pitch up and chance, putting up whatever they've got, and we at the moment don't have enforcement powers to actually deal with that effectively. So that's what this is seeking to introduce. It's not a ban, it's not a, get rid of them altogether, we're just trying to channel them through the correct authorisation procedure.
Councillor Gardner.
You have to excuse me. I have to lounge because the sun is shining on my eyes. Could you pull that roller blind down, Peter, please? No. No, we're doing it. Wrong one. No, it's this one. It's that one. Well, it looks like Peter's got a halo. That's it. It's gone now. Right, a couple of things on this. How are you going to enforce some of this? It's absolutely great, but how do you enforce it? It's got this thing with if you let a dog poo, what do you have to come out and... Do I have to ring them up and go, that highway's land opposite me? This woman who's wears a scarf or still lets her dog poo over there. How are you going to stop people doing that? A lot of the stuff is disgusting that people do in the street, but it's actually catching them. And, it's a bit like not drinking in public. That's happening all the time. And nothing seems to be done. Unless you've got enforcement officers there all the time. That's my concern. It's a great bit of, but how do you enforce it?
Thank you, Councillor. We've got the police who can also enforce the PSPO, so if they witness those kinds of incidents, they can enforce that. Also, when we get reports related to dog fouling, we do task our environmental enforcement officers to patrol over or monitor over a period and to issue FPNs if they witness the offences happening. Also, we rely on obviously members of the public to come forward to say this is happening, give us a description, and then we can send officers out.
You say about you work with the police. There's not that many police about, to be perfectly honest with you. What I do is if I see anything of a concern, it's the aggressive beggars that really cheese me off. And what I will do, if I can see them, I'll get in contact with the CCTV room, and they will then get in contact with the police, because it's a bit like, it's great being a councillor, but if you start confronting people, you could end up having your face rearranged, and there's a lot of odd things happening in different areas in the borough. I just wonder how the police are going to do it as well, because it's like you've got to get hold of the police. I know the aggressive beggars, the CCTV will ring. I think they probably ring the station, maybe, I'm not quite sure, and get somebody out, because it could turn potentially dangerous. But other things.
So the only way realistically that you're going to be able to enforce the PSPO is by programmed patrols, which we have. So we have our environmental enforcement team, as Joe said, and we have X number of hours of them per week. We currently have 10 officers, I think it's 10 under the contract, and they will work full-time hours over the course of shifts through the week. So we have those officers out on patrol every single day, 7 days a week. So they will do the routine routine patrols. We also have kind of intelligence-led tasking, so your dog fouling example, if we have some intelligence to suggest that something's happening on a very regular basis or a particular area is particularly bad, we can task those environmental enforcement officers to, can you be present down at this green space over the next week to monitor? So we can do that. So, we're not going to be all in every area of the borough at every minute of the day, but through the routine patrols and the targeted intelligence-led tasking, we feel that we can get a fair amount of successful prosecution and deterrent. So we put signs up. Dog fouling is an example. There are other PSPO restrictions that we have signage in the green spaces to warn members of the public what our PSPO restrictions are. So there's a number of things, signage, CCTV, etc., that we can rely on because we can't be in all places at all times.
Councillor Gohill.
Thanks, Chairman. I was just wondering, it actually follows on from Councillor Garden's question about enforcing this. I was wondering to what extent you work with other authorities that have cameras across the borough to pick up on things. I'm thinking particularly about e-vehicles like speeding e-bikes or e-scooters that might be going along pavements, which we all know happens across the borough, but maybe police don't pick up on it all the time. Maybe if there's some sort of camera and there's a hotspot road known, then it could be investigated, because we all know you can put as many police as you like, they're not going to be everywhere at once. So I was just wondering how those different avenues have been explored, or if they've been explored, or if they will be.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, the CCTV room that we have in Hillingdon does obviously collaborate with other councils, and we do share information in terms of vehicles, e-scooters, mopeds, and we've got current projects and operations involved with that, with the police that we're planning at the moment, specifically around the Uber Eats and the Deliveroo drivers. So that's why these have been included in the PSPO.
Any follow-up? Okay. Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Chair. Would you be able to let ward councillors know of what those kind of PSPOs are in their ward, that especially new councillors like ourselves who, well, we're not so new anymore, but just people who have kind of coming into this area, just kind of thinking, right, okay, what's going on there? Because what I often find is that there's kind of like this kind of sweep across the borough, but actually the benches on the high streets, for example, might work in Ruislip High Street, although there's a lot of alcoholics now on Ruislip High Street going on as I walk down there. But in Useley, it's just a paradise for alcoholics, just day drinking, night drinking. I've watched the police in our ward walks with the police to go. They remove them, but PSPOs are really kind of a lot of paperwork as well, aren't they? So it's just like, how do we sort that out and kind of know what's going on in our area from your PSPOs and what your officers are actually noticing in their patrols, so that we can kind of be informed and inform our residents, so that they can, so it's more like a partnership rather than you've got officers just going out and doing whatever they're doing in their shift, but things usually happen outside of people's shifts.
Thank you. We do have a monthly report from our environmental enforcement officers, and they do a breakdown of FBNs issued under the PSPO and also the localities and the reasons why in regards to specific conditions. So that's something we can share with councillors if they wish.
Do you have a follow-up?
Only that I think that would be really, really handy. I think it's great information and a great way to get councillors to interact and support the system, basically. So,
just picking up on the point that you raised there about sort of regular contact with your residents groups and yourself as ward members. We've been going through a big restructure on our side lately that includes community safety, and one of the things that's been set up under that restructure is the formation of a new antisocial behaviour and localities team. So it won't sit with Joe and myself, it will sit under community safety, but it will kind of lead on on some of the wider locality and community issues, which can include crime, antisocial behaviour, nuisance, PSPO offences, and the job of that new localities team will be to liaise with Joe about tasking for certain hotspot issues. So that is something that we're rolling out at the moment, so we hope to have some more information and from our new director as well to share with you over the coming months about how that team is developing and then how activities in your wards can be put through that team.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to what we were discussing before, I'm not suggesting it's being banned, it's just the fact that I'm trying to understand what's driving it. Because I just, in my experience, don't really see this going on, apart from maybe Uxbridge, because it's the capital of our borough in a sense. So I can understand that. I've never applied for one of these things, these applications for doing leafleting or whatever else. I just like to understand, because if something came up very quickly that we want to see that some political parties might want to campaign on, or what it might be, what's the turnaround time with getting these applications processed and approved?
It's done by our licensing team, and they're normally pretty quick. It would usually be turned around in a few days. And bear in mind, there's nothing political, religious, and a couple of other groups are actually exempt from the leaflet requirements. So this is targeting only commercial business profit. So if somebody were to just be handing out political leaflets, for example, that would be unrestricted. It's where you want to put more of a stand, tables, kind of signage, etc., and make it more of a feature or a kind of attraction piece. That's where you would need the highway event permit. At the moment, I believe they're free for non-profit organisations. We do charge for commercial highway events, but for non-profit, I do believe that they're free. They are. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it needs to be made clear, because point H doesn't, on page 34, it just says no person self-distribute. So maybe that needs to be potentially clarified, I think, to make that clear that it's not, or where the exemptions apply.
Yeah, I can look at that.
Thank you. The other thing I'll ask about is the consultation, which I understand ends on Friday.
Yes.
I'd like to know how that's going, what the response rate is like.
So Joe and myself checked this evening. We've had about 85-ish responses, so quite a number, I'd say. So yeah, we'll be going through those Monday morning probably.
We will.
So 85. Sorry, Chair, just for clarity, is that? Can you tell if they are from organisations or individuals?
Individuals. Yeah, and so the way we structured our survey, they've all marked Hillingdon resident, I believe. Yeah, so they're all residents.
Seems quite low. Okay.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chairman. Just quickly following on from one of Councillor Farley's points about the exemption for those exemption for certain groups such as religious or political, etc. Is that those within Hillingdon, or does it apply to anyone going, say, from Camden, for example?
It would be anyone. If they met the definition of non-profit, community, charity, political, religious, then it wouldn't matter to us where they were from. Thank you.
Dare I ask for a follow-up? Okay. Anyone else? No? Go on. Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Just, you said 80, again, just to make sure I heard this right, 85. Is that typical? Because that seems really quite low.
I'll let Jo answer this one. She's done more of these than I have.
That's actually quite high. That's a good response we've had this time, yes. We had very limited numbers to the previous one.
Okay. Right. Well, in that case, do you wish to have any closing remarks, sorry, before we go on? Okay. Thank you very much for your attendance then, and you're free to go whenever you wish to do so. We'll move on to the next item, which is the High Street Regeneration Post-COVID Regeneration, pages 51 to 84. Thank you for your patience, Helena. Whenever you're ready, please give your Oh, sorry, no. I'm getting ahead of myself. You're on the next one as well, that's why. There'll be no presentation. It'll go straight to questions and then you can wrap up afterwards. Questions, please. Are there any? Councillor Smallwood?
Thank you. I don't know whether officers will be able, because this is sort of like trying to get Mystic Meg and predict the future, but I just wondered whether we were, as a council, we are continue to be concerned about the impact of ULEZ on our high streets and town centres. I am certainly talking to a lot of people in recent days that own businesses who are incredibly worried about ULEZ and local charities as well. But I do think this will have an impact as we attempt to try and rebuild post-COVID. I think this will have a detrimental impact on our high streets. It may not be something that officers can particularly answer because we can't predict the future, but I think all indications are that businesses are certainly worried, whether it be changing their vehicles now to stay compliant and staying afloat, or in the future when, especially if you think about some of the borders of the borough where people are coming in to use places like Uxbridge and Northwood from the home counties, they're not going to be able, or Heathrow, they're not going to be able to.
So I would say this report was a very specific report on the evaluation of the Welcome Back Fund activity. In answer to your question, I'm aware that there's recruitment to Economic Development Manager post at the moment, so I would expect that in terms of ULEZ and actually building on the platform from the activity that was funded through the Welcome Back Fund, that's something that they would be able to take forward once they're in post.
Councillor Sullivan? Sorry, Councillor Gardner, go on. Use your mic, please, Janet, sorry.
Not. On page 67 on the Welcome Back events, they note everything's to be confirmed at the bottom about the Canal Festival last year.
I don't have the copy of the. Is there
It's a Welcome Back.
Is there a point? Or
It's that table there.
Right. So I think specifically with the Hayes Town Centre, the Canal Festival, that was support that was given to it. The festival actually took place after the funding from the Welcome Back Fund had finished, and that was an event that was actually held by the Canal and River Trust directly, whereas this activity was the estimated footfall for events which the contractor Retail Revival had delivered directly. So I think that was just the anomaly with that.
Okay.
Anything further, Councillor Gardner?
No.
Okay, Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, Chair. Following on from Councillor Gardner's question on page 67, we had a pumpkin festival on Ryfield Avenue.
Pumpkin?
Pumpkin, yes, it was Halloween, but they called it a pumpkin festival, which was very successful. Can you get rid of him? It was very successful, and the kids loved it. There was face painting, there was a balloon man, and all sorts of things. Will that be repeated? Do you know? Thank you.
I mean, with all these events, I can just say this was a specific fund that came via unspent European Regional Development funding that won't be available in future. But that said, our team, and I'm sure with the economic development team as well, are always active in terms of any potential external funding. If there are funds available, then we will try and bid for those. In some of the town centres where they are close to HS2 works, we have been supporting some of the business groups and community groups to access funding for future events. So we hope that they're successful for that. But the Welcome Back Fund was a very specific fund from a specific funding source.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. The events, I attended quite a number of them up and down the borough, and some were better than others for different reasons. Weather being one of them, and location as well that was selected. When I look at this, we've seen this before. This has been presented before the committee previously, not in its entirety, I grant you, but a lot of it is in here, which we've seen previously. Unless I'm missing something, what appears to be lacking is a bit more comprehensive feedback from the events. We've got page 68, which details some responses, but given the survey that was done prior to the events, then the events taking place and recognised footfall, we're still not entirely sure to what degree that may have increased revenue for businesses. But the feedback, I would have hoped that there was something a bit more comprehensive to bring before the committee on this, because what is presented here is quite mixed in different places as well. Is there anything that's more comprehensive that could be shared with the committee?
No, I mean, this is the summary of the full evaluation of that specific activity. Like I say, I would look at this and view this as a platform and lessons learned to be built from in terms of the economic development team. Like you say, with the events, it was a mixture of very severe weather, in some cases, very severe wind and rain. The lesson learnt was that because of the when the funding was allocated, it was a very short running period to organise the events, and also the test was organising these events on a budget of just under £5,000 per event as well. But in terms of the lessons learnt, the business organisations were given the template for planning future events, and were given sources of support as well. I think also what this summarises is some of the training that was offered to businesses in terms of digital workshops and ways to be trading online. And again, the attendance for those was quite mixed as well. So I think this is very much something to base future support on, rather than saying that this is an end in itself.
Councillor Farley?
Well, I would agree, yes, it should be a direction of travel, certainly. I wasn't suggesting that we only had this and that was the end of it. But it's just that it is quite high level. I mean, and you're just picking certain areas. We don't know what kind of businesses were feeding back into this, where these have come from. So, a business in a certain locality fared better than others. And so it's just trying to understand a bit more about what data sits behind these comments, where it's coming from. So if that data is available, then if it can be shared, then great. But if not, then we've got what we've got.
Yep. So again, like I say, the business survey was done on a borough-wide level. So we don't actually have ward level detail for that. But again, I would emphasise that I think what's important most probably is in terms of where businesses are now and where they want to be in kind of like the next 2 to 3 years. This was very much focused on post-COVID, and particularly in terms of the hospitality businesses and how they were affected with their trading and the support that we could give to them as well. But I can only say it is high level data that was captured.
Councillor Smallwood. Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say that given how much local businesses have picked up and I think reduced quite close back to normal in the post-COVID period, I just wanted to kind of say well done and well done for your hard work in this. I'm sure it helped and made a considerable impact.
Thank you for that. I think what we're finding at the moment is that it's the district town centres, Ruislip, Eastcote, some of the smaller town centres that have actually fared better with the hybrid model of now people must probably be working from home and actually using their town centres during the week rather than just at weekends. Whereas for the larger metropolitan centre of Uxbridge, that's where a lot of support is now needed because they don't have the influx of office workers that they had pre-COVID. There's also some work that we've been able to build on from this as an example with Harefield in terms of empty shops. We're looking for HS2 funding to run a community shop in one of the empty shops there, the former tattoo parlour. So they're actually test trading there at the moment with Harefield and some of the other town centres as well. The empty shops can be such a blight on the look and feel of a high street, and so if we can help in terms of, even if it's just for a short period, interim use and widening use, then I think that's an activity that we'd like to do a lot more of as well.
Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Chair. Having written many ERDF bids and ESF bids, you're usually having to put a target for the money that you get. So I'd be interested in how those targets have been met, because it's usually you've got to support so many businesses, or you've got to support it's output driven basically. And I'm kind of finding that actually I don't understand where that output has been met in this report. Today we've had quite a few reports and they seem to be low in turnout continuously. And whilst you may only have a few weeks to put something together or a short time frame, when you write that bid, you're getting that money to be able to put those events on and having the resources to put those events on. For me, when you've got people not attending, and why are they not attending, and people only coming to attend, what else are we doing to make sure people are attending these? Because for me as a business owner, things haven't got back to normal on our high streets. For most businesses, there are empty shops, people not trading so well, not making money, leases, people coming into getting shops, within a year they've lost their lease and another shop is popping up or it's empty. So that kind of new economic plan, or whatever the regeneration plan of our town centres and high streets is really important moving forward. But I just need to see, it's not high level actually. What it is just a paraphrase on each of those. If you're saying you've gone across borough, and in each of these businesses, in the areas that you've looked at, it could be a blanket statement that one person could have made, and we don't kind of get, that's not what the area is saying, and that's not what's fed back in this report. I'm a bit disappointed really. I just feel that whilst there is a real opportunity to drive business economically and bring things back, I feel that this report doesn't show that, and if that work has been done, then I want to see that data coming through, and that ERDF funding says we're going to look at this. The bid would say we're going to do this much and this is what we're going to do with it, and I don't see that merit coming back from that.
Right. Just to clarify, the source of the funding was ERD. It wasn't the usual kind of a bid that you had to apply for. So a set money of funding was allocated through the European Regional Development Funding to each local authority. So there were no outputs. It wasn't a competitive funding bid that the council entered into. It was unallocated ERDF funding, which was earmarked for the Welcome Back initiative across the UK, and so there weren't any outputs, and also the funding couldn't actually be used to support individual businesses or individual people in terms of training or business outputs. So it actually wasn't the usual. I've managed ERDF and European Social Fund projects. It wasn't that kind of project in terms of having to evidence and achieve outputs. So that's why that isn't in this report, because there weren't those kind of outputs that were ever an expectation of that funding, and that hadn't been delivered. So that's the reason for that. Again, I could only just emphasise that this is a summary specifically on that particular initiative. It doesn't go past activity since March 2022, because that's when that initiative stopped.
Thank you. Apologies, Councillor Bridges. Refresh my memory. Did I give you a follow-up?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Still, there's an output of delegates attended is 131 for certain things. I still feel that these are really low numbers and low turnouts, and I'd like to see a bit more ambition in some of the things. 85 on another response, 131 here, out of a borough of I don't know how many residents we have in our borough at this moment, but it just feels that it's really, where's the ambition to get more there? So I'm hoping that in the new plan as we move forward, and this is what this is now happened, and we're looking at more, that we are actually more ambitious in how we're driving our businesses.
Yeah, certainly our team certainly doesn't lack ambition, and the council is ambitious. I can only emphasise again that what we were asked to do was a evaluation of a particular project that happened in a particular time frame with a particular source of funding, and so I wouldn't want say that this report has tried to summarise that as best as we can, but we're not. There wasn't the time to actually go back to people who'd signed up to courses to ask them why they hadn't been able to attend or what had stopped them from attending. It was a very quick project that had to be set up at very short notice and run for basically 6 months of delivery. So the kind of practice that we might have done if a project that was running over a longer time period, there just wasn't the ability to include that in this particular project.
Any other questions before we move on? No? Okay, thank you for that, Helena. So we'll now go on to the next item, which is the review of alligating, pages 85 to 110. And this one you're going to have to do a bit more and give a presentation on this one, so whenever you're ready.
Right, thank you. So, as you know, we've had a review of the alligating initiative in Hillingdon over the past few months, with witness sessions from residents who've been in receipt of gates and how they found the process. We've also heard from another borough, Ealing, in terms of how the process works there. And we've also, myself and Neil have given evidence in terms of how the system works at the moment and how we're trying to improve the system as well. In this report, I think in section 4, there's some possible areas for emerging recommendations which have been given, which members were asked to consider, and we'd be happy to take questions in terms of that. So, for example, for item 1, how to raise awareness of residents' responsibilities in relation to their alligating scheme. Just to remind members that the evidence from Ealing is that they have a plaque which is put on gates, which makes it clear that the gate has been initiated at the request of residents, and that it's up to residents to maintain responsibility for those gates and to use the gates as intended. And that's something that we haven't done at the moment, and we thought that might be quite helpful in terms of emphasising that it's not a council-led scheme, but it is very much residents taking care of the gates and making sure that they are closed so that they can achieve the desired effect. So I don't know if there was any comments in terms of Ealing and the response from them.
If perhaps I can just start on that. I do agree. I think the sign would be beneficial. Even if it just says keep gates closed and keep clear, because that's one thing that you notice a lot around the borough where people put their own makeshift signs up and things like that. So a bit of universal branding would be helpful, I think, if we had that up when the scheme was first put in. I appreciate that it's resident-led, but we have heard throughout these reviews the frustration at times of residents when people move or die, no single point of contact. And what I would like to see, I'm not saying we should take the responsibility as a council, but what I would like to see is that in the event that if a resident couldn't reach the key holder, there is a generic email address, perhaps alligating@hillingdon.gov.uk or something like that, where they could perhaps just contact your department to say we've got a problem with this alleyway, so that you then have visibility and you can perhaps look through your records to see who is down on that list to have a key and perhaps make contact and try and put them in touch with each other.
Yeah. So we do, and in fact we have just finished. So we do an annual email out to the contacts that we have for the alligating system, just to check that they are still happy to be the lead resident and that we have their correct contact details as well. What we thought is that we could actually use that opportunity just to check in with the lead resident whether there are any particular issues that they need to check with the team as well. So rather than just checking that we have their data in terms of their email address and telephone number, that's an opportunity that if they want to say, oh, by the way, we might, could we do with some help with this or whatever. And that does have, we do have a generic alligating@hillingdon.gov address as well.
Yeah. So
could that be put on a potential sign if that was a recommendation, to have that contact email as a last resort if they couldn't make contact? If a new person moves into the area, which is happening quite drastically now with the rented sector, they at least have a final solution by sending an email to that contact if they cannot reach the known key holder in that road.
Yeah, certainly. So what we could do is create a draft template and then we could put it forward for review and see if we can try and create something that would meet all the points addressed. So just touching on, so when we are contacted by people, if they're trying to sort of obtain a key, what we try to do, just to speed the process up, our advice is often to say to residents to perhaps speak with your neighbours, see if you can get a copy of the key from them, get your own copy, and then in the meantime what we will then do is research through, and if we can find the contact details of the lead resident, we will ask them if they are happy for us to pass on their contact details to the person that's making the inquiry, just to make sure that we're covered in terms of sort of data protection, and then hopefully then we can sort of create the sort of contact between the inquirer and the lead resident and resolve the issues that way. But as our first sort of request is just for them to speak to the neighbours, because if they need the key urgently, that's one thing we can't guarantee is how quickly we can get a response back, or if we do get a response. So that's just sort of what we try to do, just to speed things up in between waiting for a response from the lead resident, if we do have their details on file and they are still the lead resident in existence.
Councillor Gohill?
Thanks, Chairman. I'm conscious it's 9:05, so I'll be quick. I actually disagree. I think it's actually not the best idea to put that as a resident-led scheme on this plaque. I don't disagree with the plaque. I just don't think we should say it's resident-led, because if in areas, especially, we've heard a lot in this process about ASB in those areas and, people littering and loitering, and if they knew it was resident-led, they knew there wasn't an authority behind it, and it would almost encourage that. I like the idea of adding the email address onto it, but I just don't think it should say resident-led, but maybe something simple like keep the gate closed, for example, could be useful. And just a second point is that with there's been a big shift lately onto residents who are signing up to their My Hillingdon accounts online. A really useful thing to probably do, if possible, maybe not now, but maybe in the near future, would be if there's new residents in those allocating areas that you know have moved in because they've signed up for council tax or whatnot, maybe just to write to them and say, this is a resident-led scheme, this is your person, and contact them if you have any issues. If not, there's allocating@hillingdon.gov.uk. Just two things that maybe we could add to it, if possible.
I have to say that the review also prompted us to look at our systems as well, and what we thought we could do better is asking for feedback once a new allocating scheme has gone in. We think we could be much smarter about that, and perhaps asking for feedback 6 months after it's been installed, just to make sure that it is working as intended, but also to get feedback on how the residents found the application process, so that we can look at how we can improve there or make that more user-friendly as well. So that's something that we'd like to put forward as our own recommendation, that we do that review, that feedback from residents after 6 months as well. And I think in terms of promoting the scheme, we also thought that perhaps a feature in Hillingdon People, and see if people from a recent scheme would like to come forward and use that as a way of promoting that as well. Because although there is information and a page on the council website, I think Hillingdon People is obviously the magazine that goes to every household, and it might be that people who hadn't actually thought about a gate to look on the website, that's a way of making contact with them as well.
One of the other issues raised throughout the review was the concerns over bank accounts and the retaining of funds. Is there any recommendations or suggestions you feel could address those concerns? Do we have any, I appreciate we have to be cost neutral with these things, but is there any potential that we could retain the funds ourselves as a council rather than make them go to banks and we can release the funds as and when they're requested?
Yeah, I think that came from the witnesses who attended the session, and that was older schemes that I think were about 12?
10 to 12.
10 to 12 years now. So our experience and our feedback from more recent schemes is that perhaps hasn't been so much of an issue, and that the way that the community banking is set up now might well be more user-friendly than 10 to 12 years ago when those accounts were first opened. I don't know if there's anything you want to...
And in terms of the feedback about providing minutes to the bank, is that still an issue with the new schemes? And if so, is there a template we can perhaps provide them to perhaps submit that if they do get those problems?
Yeah, I mean, with each of our schemes, we will keep a log at every sort of step from sort of first contact with the resident right the way to completion, and so that information could be provided if required, if the lead resident wanted it, or us to create something based off of the information that we have, or to help them with the bank, then that's certainly something we can provide.
Any other comments or questions? No? Councillor Farley?
Through the Chair, I'm not sure your question got the answer that I was looking for. So it was mentioned about bank accounts, but you mentioned the new schemes. That still doesn't answer about the schemes that are in, what happens to their bank accounts, and what recommendations we can do that will deal with those. Most of those were the witnesses that kindly spared their time to come and explain that situation occurs to them. I'm not sure that we got an answer to that. You should have deferred to the newer applications. I
think we're certainly want to work with you and obviously with colleagues in democratic services in making a smart recommendation that would cover that. I don't think we've actually got the answers here and there, and I don't think we want to. We're not going to bluff it in terms of. I don't think that's helpful to anyone.
No, it wouldn't be fair to give like the answer which we don't have succinctly enough to give to you today. I would say we don't get a huge number of sort of issues regarding the sort of bank details or the resident not being able to access bank details. There's a lot of I think so. Although we recommend, it would be an idea to sort of just to bear in mind that there could be associated costs and that these would need to be financed. So just to have say something in reserve if possible. We don't get a large number of residents who sort of like, I think they just feel like as long as the gates are installed, they'll just sort of like, fingers crossed they'll be okay and they won't need to pay for any further repairs. We've also now, hopefully this will help with the sort of refurbishment scheme which we've got set up as well. So if they have got any funds in that, then we can help sort of with the refurbishment scheme, so they only have to pay potentially up to 90% of the repair. We pay 90%, they pay 10%. So hopefully that will help as well. But yeah, that's something that we're going to have to look into, I think, to answer your question at a later date.
I think just to add, after that witness session, we did speak directly with all the witnesses, and contact details were shared, and we have offered to help with their individual cases. So we wouldn't like you to think that we had left those witnesses high and dry. We did follow through and give our contact details, and we're in contact with them as well.
And did you make any progress with those? Because one of those, that one example that Mr. I know his first name, Raj Duty, I think his surname was. There's a stash of money sitting in a bank somewhere which is not being touched, and if you can't deal with that, I would strongly advise you perhaps consult our colleagues in legal or perhaps finance who may be able to find some sort of loophole or alternative way we've not necessarily thought about to try and assist those residents. Putting those recommendations aside and just focusing on that specific issue, that those residents are still at the moment have no resolution in place. If you could feed that back and maybe come back to us separately outside the meeting on those specific cases, that would be appreciated.
Certainly.
Sorry, Councillor Farley, I hijacked that. Did you want to follow up?
No, Chair.
Okay.
I just want to supplement what you were saying.
Right,
Thank you.
okay. Councillor Smallwood?
I do have a follow on that, Chair. Would it, just outside the box thinking, just came to me in a moment there. What about council officers being trying to get council officers as two of the signatories onto the schemes, right? They're never going to sort of interfere, but should, Mrs. Biggins move to Dover or, whatever, then there is always two council officers on there that can step in. So if we could try and get and I know council officers will come and go, but it's quite easy if someone is alive and you know where they are to change that. It's not easy, but it's a lot easier than when they're dead or they just disappear and don't worry about it. As part of a handover in your job, forcing that as something that you do is going to be an awful lot easier than making somebody do it who's volunteering. So I don't know whether two council officers maybe being on every scheme as a backup would solve an awful lot of those problems as a practical idea. Thank you, Chair.
Any feedback to that, Helena, Neil?
Yeah, certainly we're open to all suggestions, but obviously we would need to follow through with legal services and possibly HR in terms of that.
I know Liz is frantically writing notes, so we're just purely brainstorming at the moment, but we hopefully will look at these points outside the meeting and come back with some more firmer recommendations when we come back to meet next time. Councillor Gardner.
Can I make a suggestion that although you want recommendations, you seem to have worked out most of the recommendations yourself in terms of what is needed. Would it be easier for you, and probably easier for us, if you present us with what you think we need to know? Because we're backwards and forwards with different suggestions. I just wonder if, as you're the officers, and you could put a form of words together, if you could do your recommended recommendations. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. I'll probably just go one step further and ask the committees permission, that I liaise with the Labour lead outside the meeting to collate all of our suggested recommendations, work with the officers with theirs, and then we put them all together and see what ones work and which ones don't, and then present you with a final list at the next meeting. If that's okay. Thank you. Do you wish to sum up anything, Helena, based on what was discussed? Neil?
Well, I'd just like to say, for a very long-going initiative, we found this review very helpful, because you can't take things for granted, and you know, we do want to make sure that we are being responsive to residents as well. So we just wanted to thank you, because it made us and it prompted us to think internally about how we can improve as well.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your time over the course of this review and your contributions. It's been very much appreciated to you both. Okay, the forward plan, Janet? Councillor Gardner, sorry. Yep, thank you. Assuming no one else had any other points on that. It's usually the standard that Councillor Gardner just signs it off for us. The work programme, pages 1 to 3 to 1 to 6, are they agreed? Thank you very much. That concludes our business for this evening. Have a safe journey home, and we'll see you all very soon. Good night.